Hey everyone, welcome to Zonan Canada. I'm your host, Jesse Betteridge. This is a podcast that looks at the connections between anime and Canadian media. And in this episode, we're going to be doing another retrospective on a specific anime show that has a unique cultural impact in Canada. And this time we're looking at Cardcaptors, which is the original English language adaptation of Cardcaptor Sakura. And oh boy, there is a lot to say about this one and a lot of strong opinions on this one. And I'm hoping we can cover this pretty comprehensively in one go. But, we'll see how it goes. And joining me, as with every other magical girl adventure we've had on Zonan Canada, is Aaron Dearden. Aaron, thanks for joining. Can you just let everyone know what you do on the internet?
Oh, yeah. For those who don't know me, I tend to haunt the online spaces as Aaron Cerise. I have a YouTube channel. Technically, I have two major projects, but one of them is on hiatus right now. That's Maho Profile, A History of Magical Girls. Right now, my active project is the podcast Super Idols RPG, which is a Masks actual play podcast about magical person high school idols.
Awesome. And joining us again, for the first time since the Love Live episode, we're having a little bit of a Love Live reunion here, is noted YouTube celebrity Rin Senpai. Rin, welcome back. Can you let everyone know what you do on the internet?
Hey, I'm Rin Senpai. YouTuber, now Twitch streamer. Then, Twitch partner, I guess you could say now even.
Okay, so the Twitch part is more important now, I guess.
I kind of do both at the same time still, right? YouTube's still the larger one.
I watch anything like that I watch is usually through YouTube. But
oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm still playing Love Live. I had many stories to go over with Love Live in my experiences, but I've also included Genshin Impact into my repertoire of things that I look after now. Yeah. Still doing that stuff, I guess. Not much else to say.
I was watching one of your streams a while ago. My cat was really into it. She seemed really into Love Live.
Everyone tells me about their cat when they come to the stream. Like, my cat's watching your stream. Like, that's great.
So Cardcaptors was, the dub of Cardcaptor Sakura, produced by Nelvana. That was 20 years ago. So maybe I need to add a little bit of extra context because this might not be what everyone recognizes Cardcaptor Sakura as. So right now, Cardcaptor Sakura is very accessible. It's on Crunchyroll. It's on Netflix in HD, and I gotta say, it looks gorgeous when you watch it on either one. I think there are even better looking masters out there too, in like 4K or whatever. But the version you can see on Netflix and Crunchyroll is really good. Both of those versions allow you to watch the show in Japanese with English subtitles. There's also an English dub that you can watch.
Oh boy, is there an English dub?
Yeah.
Huh.
But if you listen to this English dub, you will notice that it is definitely not produced in Canada. Definitely not what aired in Canada 20 years ago. It is actually a Hong Kong produced English dub that was made for the Southeast Asian market. And I noticed a lot of people seem to think it's a new dub that was made for Netflix. It's not. It actually was made around the same time as Cardcaptors was for predominantly English-speaking markets. I can't say I recommend this dub. It is very unnatural, kind of janky. I know that some people like these dubs because there is a bit of a charm to it. And I guess if you're if a young child wants to check out Cardcaptor Sakura, it's fine.
Yeah, that'd be fine. But I couldn't make it through a whole episode of that one even.
There's ones that come out pretty funny. It is completely authentic to the original script. With young kids, if they're under 10, or it depends on the kid, of course, but kids tend to be less critical of bad dubbing. But anybody who is discerning at all about performances, you're gonna find this dub is at best for throwing something on in the background. If for catching up on the show for this podcast, I threw a few episodes this dub for a few of them, like Sharon and Carol switching bodies. Yeah, I'll throw that one on in the background. I think
no, that's one of the ones you should definitely watch the sub for, though.
Okay, maybe I'll go back to it. There were some important things that happened in that episode. Maybe I was wrong to dismiss it. Maybe I'll go back to that one.
Half the fun of that episode is getting to hear the voice actors do impressions of each other.
That's true, and yeah, that's something that would definitely not come through very well in the Hong Kong dub. Okay, I guess I messed this whole thing up. Let's just cancel the podcast. Cardcaptors, the Canadian produced dub. So typically when a dub is done in Canada, there's usually an American company behind it, like Saban or 4Kids, that's making the actual like editorial decisions. That was not the case with Cardcaptors. This is unique in that a Canadian company was, for the most part, handling everything. There was another party involved, which actually seems to have had a considerable amount of influence, but not to the same extent as you see with like the dubs that 4Kids put out. But Nelvana, for the most part, they were the license holder and distributor, and there are a lot of mixed opinions about this dub. I think as an adaptation, most people feel it's not a good representation of the original at all. If you ask people in like the United States or the UK, you're probably going to hear more negative opinions about it. If you talk to people from Canada or Australia, you're probably going to hear, at least from people who watched it back when they were young, more positive opinions. It's something that's really going to depend on what country you're from. But of course, on the internet, in a lot of spaces, opinions from people in the United States can kind of dominate the discourse a lot of the time. And I think that perception of Cardcaptors has really colored the general narrative about that dub for a while. But there's been some interesting things that have come up. Just back in 2015, someone uploaded a mysterious torrent that contained all 70 episodes of Nelvana's Cardcaptors dub, which surprised a lot of people because in the United States, the dub was cut down to 39 episodes. Kids WB, the broadcaster, did not air the whole thing. They skipped large chunks of it. They edited episodes together, and people were surprised to learn because, well, let's face it, a lot of the times for people who live in the United States, they're not going to be as aware of what's going on in other countries. But a more complete version did run in other places, and it has a lot of the same problems for sure. But because it aired a little more complete in some places, people could absorb it a little better and get a better perception of it. And I was asking around, much like I did with Pretty Cure, in some in Canada-centric anime communities on social media, and people were overwhelmingly positive about Cardcaptors. I was honestly a little surprised because I'm so used to hearing the overly negative things. If anything, some people are maybe too defensive of that dub because it makes some drastic decisions, unfortunately. But the important thing is that it had a lasting impact for a lot of people. It aired on Teletoon. They aired almost the whole thing. They skipped one episode. They aired it in the correct order. It means a lot to a lot of people, so we got to cover it. It's a critical piece of history. So before we kind of delve into that more, I want to hear everyone's personal experience with Cardcaptors, with Cardcaptor Sakura, or with Clamp. Aaron, can we start with you?
Sure. I think you mentioned Clamp, and I think as I've read some of those social media posts that you mentioned, and I can definitely confirm from my personal experience that there definitely was a Cardcaptors to Cardcaptor Sakura to Clamp pipeline that seems to exist.
I think for a lot of people, it was Cardcaptors straight to Tsubasa.
Yeah, well, I'm a little bit before the generation that did that, but
yeah. But yeah, like I think even if you had even for people who had a bad experience with Cardcaptors, I think this was definitely the big exposure that many people had to Clamp back around that time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because my experience for sure was definitely watching Cardcaptors on Teletoon. It was one of the many shows that I was trying to watch dubbed at the time, because by that time I knew what anime was, I knew what I was looking for. So I would watch Cardcaptors and Digimon and Pokemon and even like they tried to catch stuff like Moncoli Knights and Flint the Time Detective, all that stuff. So it felt like it was part of the ecosystem of that system of dubs. And as part of that ecosystem, it was fine. I enjoyed it. I don't think I at first knew anything was up with it, other than it maybe even at that age seemed a little stilted in places. But it seemed cool. I really liked the art style and the designs and the systems of magic and whatnot. But I did learn pretty quickly how extensive the changes were. And this was due in part to the fact that I started attending one of my local anime clubs, Jaws. This was back in Calgary. I think the Jaws club there might actually still be running. I think it's, what is it, the Japanese Animation Watching Society or something like that. Watchers Society.
They
it ran out of the back room.
Acronym there.
Sorry?
Definitely aiming for the acronym there.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
There were a bunch of clubs that had names like that in Alberta. I know that Jams existed somewhere as well. But anyway, Jaws ran out of like the back room of the Sentry Box, which was a game and card store in Calgary, still is. And that was my first exposure to a lot of subtitled anime. We would get together, I think, once every few weeks or once a month or something like that. And one of the first shows that I watched when I started going to Jaws was Cardcaptor Sakura, and I was extremely hype about it at the time because I wanted to see what the original was like. I think by that point I had seen fan subs of Sailor Stars, so that was not my first experience of watching the original version of something I grew up watching dubbed on YTV or Teletoon, but it was an early example for sure, and I was very, very into it, and then I became very resentful of the Nirvana dub for changing so much. But I still, like, kind of secretly held a soft spot for it regardless. Like, I knew a lot of people spoke badly of the dub, so I was an impressionable young kid. I didn't want to speak out of turn, but I still felt like I had a soft spot for it regardless.
And I know you developed a fairly strong affection for Clamp as you went further down that hole.
Yeah, definitely. I slid further down the pipeline that I mentioned. From Cardcaptor Sakura, I picked up, I started to recognize that Clamp was the name connected to it, and that it was connected to some other things that were popular around the time. The big one for me was X. X was my other big Clamp title that I picked up the manga for, and I was just absolutely blown away because that's like one of the goriest things that Clamp has ever written and drawn. And I was all about that. Definitely was into, I think Wish. Wish was another one of my big titles that I really liked a lot. I still think that should have gotten more than like an animated music video out of that at some point. It's a really sweet little story. I definitely fell down the Clamp hole after that for a while. I think by the time Tsubasa and Holic started coming out, I was less into it. I was less into those stories because I think I felt they were getting a little like convoluted. Like Clamp has always been kind of convoluted, to be honest. Yeah. But I think I was just starting to recognize it more at the time. So I noticed like a bunch of my friends in high school were getting into Tsubasa, and I felt a little weird because I wasn't really as into that as much. But I can see the appeal of it, at least, especially if you grew up with Cardcaptors or Cardcaptor Sakura, or really any Clamp titles.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strong foundation. Even if you only watched Cardcaptors, it creates a pretty strong foundation because, you know, you have Chloe Reed is like a central figure to so much of like the greater, I don't want to say Clamp verse, but my understanding is that Tsubasa and Holic are not only alternate universe things, they are kind of sequels to Cardcaptor Sakura as well. It all links together in a really convoluted way.
Basically the CEU, the Clamp Extended Universe.
Yeah, they said at the beginning of Holic that you don't have to follow Tsubasa to understand what's going on, and that was a filthy lie. You need to have at least some familiarity with some of the later stuff. That was disappointing because I liked Holic quite a bit. But anyway, Rin, can you share your experience with Cardcaptors, Cardcaptor Sakura, Clamp, and all that stuff?
It was with Teletoon way back in the day when it first like started showing up in Canada, because that was like a huge thing for a lot of children, something to watch after school. I remember the premiere. You linked it to me in the Discord earlier, and it like sent my soul skyrocketing. I was like, holy crap, I haven't seen this in friggin' forever.
Yeah, the promo.
Yeah, the promo. I remember seeing it very distinctly. I was like, what is this? This is going to be cool. So I watched it. And you know how there's like Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z and Pokemon that was kind of already established back then, right? But I didn't really think of them as anime. I just thought of them just as like another like Canadian American kind of cartoon thing because it was just so common. So seeing something like this in a similar style, like I wasn't really sure what anime was yet. I thought it was really interesting as a child, and then now as like the 2 episodes that you linked me specifically, I can't believe so many of the things that I missed that just stood out and just didn't make any sense. So with Cardcaptor Sakura, I would say that would be my first actual anime before I started getting into like anime as a thing, like knowing what it was, until someone in school showed me how to start downloading things off the internet on the PC because he wanted me to help him get Evangelion or something. Right. And then so while I was helping him do that, I saw there's like a whole bunch of other things that you could look for. So from there, I ended up just rediscovering Cardcaptor Sakura in the original Japanese dub. And I was just like, oh, this is actually Japanese show. So I was like, what is this? So I checked it out and I just really enjoyed it still from there. And then the other series, like I would say Clamp is also the first company of like shows that I was following, because right after Cardcaptor Sakura, I started watching Angelic Layer and I started watching Chobits. Those two shows really, they're pretty important to me, I guess, as you can say, when it comes to just like things that I grew up with.
When you watched Cardcaptor Sakura, were you surprised by like the changes compared to what you saw on TV?
Yes, because I noticed when I was watching it, there's a lot more focus on the romance in the anime. In the dub, I didn't really. There was like a little sense of it from Shaoran, but from everyone else, I didn't even notice it at all.
Yeah,
until the anime showed up.
They hint at things like a little tiny bit.
Yeah, a tiny bit, right?
When it's unavoidable, right.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, they're just being friends. Like, there's a perfect meme for that, right? So when I saw the anime, it was just really cool because, you know, I'm like someone like me at the time going through a lot of questions about myself. So it was really interesting to see that in some sort of media rather than it just being hushed and, you know, don't even talk about it kind of thing.
Did you find that any of that stuff kind of shone through with the dub, or was it not till you saw the subtitled version?
Not till I saw the subtitled version and then understood it, then went back to the dub and I was just like, oh, I get it. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Toya. Yukito, yeah. It's like, all right. I got it.
In my opinion, well, we'll get into that. That was not as that part was not as suppressed in the Nelvana dub as I expected. But yeah, all sorts of things related to the relationships were the main thing that was toned down in Cardcaptors, mainly to refocus it. Jovi, I'm curious, did you have friends who were into Cardcaptors as well, or did you find people online who were fans of either version?
No friends. I was by myself. Just watching cartoons after school. I didn't really watch, like maybe my sister, but she wasn't into it. She was doing her own thing anyway. But yeah, I didn't really talk to anyone. But when did it come out in Canada again? 1999, I think?
It was 2000.
2000?
Yeah.
So that was
August 2000.
August 2000.
August 23rd, 2000. That's when it debuted on Teletoon. And it had been on Kids WB a few months before that. Technically available in Canada if you had a premium cable subscription. So as for me, you know, late 1999, early 2000s, that's, you know, around the time that Pokemon was big and there was the whole kind of resurgence of Dragon Ball Z after it had been gone for a little while from Canadian TV and then came back as it was picking up steam in the States, and Gundam Wing. You know, that's when I started to become more curious looking into anime beyond just what's on TV. So I think a lot of my early exposure to anime discussion online was at the Planet Namek forums, where I was known to peruse a little bit in late middle school, and that's when I started to become more aware of Toonami in the United States, and you know what they were showing, the way shows were being edited, and man, people had a lot to complain about this Cardcaptors show that had just started running in June. Apparently on Kids WB. When people started talking about it, I didn't know what it was. I certainly knew how it was edited, how they rearranged episodes, how they jumped to episode 8 to not so much to downplay Sakura as the main character, but to try and have more balance between the female and male characters. It was discussed as this outrageous aberration, and it was just totally everything negative. So when I heard it was coming to Teletoon later, just a couple months later in August, my excitement was pretty muted. And of course at that point I was already starting to rent tapes, uncut dubs and subtitled shows, from a local store. And my, exposure to anime had grown quite a bit in that time. So I was not as interested, but I did catch some of the episodes that ran on Teletoon. And after it started running on Teletoon, I began renting Pioneer's home video releases, which were in Japanese with English subtitles. From the little that I had seen of the show on Teletoon, I could tell there were massive changes, especially with the relationships between the characters. The big thing that's edited in Cardcaptors is Sakura's crush on Yukito, or Julian, as he's called in the dub. And that was definitely the most prominent thing I noticed between the two versions. And I'm like, oh wow, this is completely different. I mean, they still reference it now and again in the TV dub, but it's practically the central focus in the original. And that's how I knew, oh, this is way, way different. So I rented tapes. I watched about 20 episodes. I know I think Pioneer delayed one of the releases, that they were doing at that time. They skipped volume 3 and went to volume 4. I think it was just a production issue, but people said it was because there was controversy over some kind of relationship in Cardcaptor Sakura that was so scandalous they had to...
Cardcaptor Sakura? Questionable relationships? No.
I'm pretty sure it was actually just a production issue. But I think that's kind of when I hit a snag in renting it, and I just never got caught up again. And I was always, as I was with many shows at that time, I was just like, oh, well, when I can afford to buy all the anime DVDs I want, I'll just buy this series because it's clearly worth buying. And then by the time I could, had the money to buy DVDs, I realized that a lot of time had passed by and other things had come that had captured my interest. And also buying single show on DVD was not as achievable as I thought at that time. So it kind of fell on the wayside for a little while. Every now and again, I would catch a random episode of Cardcaptors. I went back and watched the whole thing on Netflix a few months ago specifically to prepare for this episode, which was also an excuse to watch the show again, which I wanted to do. And I greatly enjoyed it. It's it's a fantastic show for all ages. And I can't, if you haven't watched the whole thing or watched the whole original series, I say just go do it. It's really great. If you have kids, get them to watch it too. Like I said, they won't mind the dub. That's on Netflix, or at least at the time of recording, it's on Netflix and Crunchyroll. So plenty of ways to watch it. But when I went back and watched it, I realized, oh, I absorbed more of this than I thought I had. I mentioned that Cardcaptors had a really negative reputation online at the time when I was kind of delving into internet anime culture. And I was thinking that, oh, well, I mean, that was fueled mainly by the US version. And I think that I was expecting that when we recorded this episode, I was going to be kind of dispelling those myths and kind of defending the dub to a degree. When I went back to watch the dubbed episodes from that, mysterious torrent. So the key thing about that torrent I want to emphasize is that it has all 70 episodes and it actually doesn't have any network IDs or anything. So these weren't television broadcast episodes. Someone must have leaked this out of Nelvana or something because it's the most complete version out there. But I watched it from that upload and man, even this complete Nelvana version has most of the worst problems of that adaptation. So yeah, let's talk about Cardcaptor Sakura itself. Cardcaptor Sakura began running in Nakayoshi magazine. This is the I guess if you count Pretty Cure, this is the fourth Nakayoshi title we've talked about on this show now. It started in May 1996 and ran for 50 chapters, and I believe it has a total of 12 volumes versus a 70 episode series. So like a lot of other Nakayoshi adaptations, you have these small amount of manga content that is adapted over a very large number of episodes. And if you're familiar with the Sailor Moon formula, that's pretty representative of how a lot of Nakayoshi adaptations are done, because it's a monthly magazine. Usually the chapters are long, and they got to take those chapters and make as many anime episodes as possible with them. Like Candy could very, very thoroughly flesh out a chapter into like 15 episodes. No problem. Sailor Moon got, more creative with the way they did filler episodes.
Yeah, well, they had a more built-in Monster of the Week format, and to a degree,
exactly.
Cardcaptor Sakura does too.
Yeah, they just had to double the number of glow cards in the show, but it works. Cardcaptor Sakura wound up being technically formulaic, but it's always really, really solid and really enjoyable. And I got to say, it's a better show to kind of savor over a long period of time than to binge on.
Yeah, I found that because I had to watch it in a more compressed time frame for this podcast.
Yeah.
And I ended up skipping a good number of episodes because after a while I was like, okay, this is the formula. This is how a general episode feels.
Yeah.
And I watched I remember a bunch of these from back in the day anyway, so I'll just skip around to the most, like, important episodes.
If you watch too much of it together, you're just like, you know, especially in that first half, it's like, come on, when are they going to do the thing they keep teasing? Like, every several episodes, when are you going to finally do this thing? They do the thing in episode
or it's
46.
Like, I've heard enough of Sakura gushing about Yukito for today. I need to stop.
Well, they fixed that problem in Cardcaptors. Yeah. Clamp was a group of manga artists. They started as a doujinshi circle in the early 90s, doing a lot of work that was derivative of like Devilman and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and a lot of other titles like that. They've had, I think, a total of 12 members over time. I don't know what their exact formation was at the time that Cardcaptor Sakura came out. But in basically every iteration of Clamp, Nanase Okawa, she is basically the central creative figure behind Clamp. She is quote unquote group leader. She handles the story and the scripts. She does most of the creative, impulses go back to her. And she's highly influenced by things like Devilman and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and has, a real penchant for like quasi-biblical imagery and like light and darkness themes.
There's a reason like the stereotypical image of a Clamp person is like someone with like one angel wing and one devil wing.
Yeah. That kind of summarizes it all right there. Their published work came out a little later in the 90s. Most of their work up to that point had been in Asuka magazine, which I guess you'd call it a Fujoshi magazine now, but it's like older shoujo, kind of darker themed, girl targeted stuff, more for people who are into anime, and more into fandom than just casual readers like you'd find with like Nakayoshi or Hanato Yume or something like that. They kind of got their start in Nakayoshi, and I actually should say Nakayoshi is targeted at like girls in like grade 4, 5, and 6. That's their kind of their target audience. They had previously done Magic Knight Ray Earth, which was another magical girl series. That one was a bit of a departure from what they had done before. It featured characters in middle school, but Okawa, in a follow-up magical girl work, she wanted to not focus so much on what was conventional in magical girls, but something that would be more to think more of who was the target audience for magical girls. And she's like, who's something that she wanted to create, like a character that the audience could relate to and also kind of look up to a degree. And you see that with Sakura. She's not perfect. She's relatable. And a lot of focus just came into developing the character that way.
Yeah.
And the other two people, who I think were most prominent were, Mokona, who was the art director, and Tsubaki Nikoi, who designed most of the characters. Again, I'm sorry, I don't know who else was kind of part of Clamp at that time. But yeah,
I know there was one other person. I can't remember which person it was though.
Yeah. Sorry. Sorry, Clamp fans. I know you're probably screaming, at whatever you're listening to this podcast, with right now, but I've let you down.
Satsuki Igarashi. That's the name I remember. That's the name I recognize.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So the anime, started April 7th, 1998. So, a fair bit of lead time for a Nakayoshi. Usually when they have a big hit, they get it made into an anime as fast as possible. And they kind of they gotta get that, get it on the assembly line to get that merch out as fast as they can, faster than they can write anime most of the time. They had a little more leeway with Cardcaptor Sakura, and this was a little more of a lavish production than you'd usually expect for a Nakayoshi adaptation. Yeah. It was produced by Madhouse Studios, and it actually aired across 3 separate seasons with a fair bit of break in between each one. So again, lots of flexibility. It did not air on, at least not initially, on terrestrial television. It actually aired on the NHK BS2 satellite channel, which I think it no longer exists in the form it was in at that time. I think they were estimated as being about 13 million subscribers, which is more than I thought there'd be for a satellite channel in Japan, because most people in Japan don't have satellite or cable. Usually it's kind of an unnecessary expense because just regular terrestrial television, it covers your needs. So it's a bit of a luxury. So right off the bat, it has this broadcast that, if anything, is more similar to like Dear Brother, which had run about 6 years earlier on the same channel in a similar time slot. So you have like high quality production, kind of a limited audience reach. So bit of a strange move because it feels like it's not getting near the amount of exposure that, say, a Sailor Moon does. And also, I don't know if it even would have had advertising on NHK BS2 because those episodes are like 26 minutes. So it would be like little to no advertising running it. And if you've ever
customers have been paying more for their satellite packages, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. And it's a public channel as well. So, and if you've ever seen a Sailor Moon commercial break, you know that, they just advertise Sailor Moon merchandise in a manner that would be incredibly illegal in both Canada and the United States. So you're not, the commercial outlets for Cardcaptor Sakura seem a lot more limited. Despite that, it was a massive, massive success in Japan. One of the most popular shows running during that era, with both young children and older fans. And it definitely was a show that aimed to kind of bridge that gap between audiences, if not skew a little older than a lot of Magical Girl stuff did at that time. So it was directed by Morio Asaka. So I would say that Morio Asaka, he is probably one of the most prolific directors of shoujo anime in the last 25 years. In addition to Cardcaptor Sakura, and he came back for Clear Card a couple of years ago as well. Oh shoot, I didn't have my list up of the stuff that he's done, but it's a lot. Sorry, 1 minute. Oh no, Anime News Network's down.
I was surprised looking at the list of what he's worked on too and been like, oh, okay then. All right then. Because he's definitely also like this. He also got back in Clamp Waters by doing the Chobits anime. He directed one of my personal favorite old comedy anime, Galaxy Angel. And as far as important shoujo titles go, Nana is a huge one that is very important to a lot of people.
Well, more Josei, but Chihaya Furu, and entire thing so far.
Yeah.
And Ori Monogatari, or My Love Story. That was another
those are more
one.
recent titles. Well, more recent in the fact that it's in the last 10 years, but yes.
Yeah. So I think more people know like Kunihiko Ikuhara or Junichi Sato by name, but I think that Morio Asaka in the last about 25 years or so, or a couple of decades, he has probably been the more prolific director of specifically shoujo stuff and also Clamp.
Yeah, the closest he's gotten to like something for guys, I think, is probably Gunslinger Girl.
Yeah, so very, very strong directorial talent behind it. Series composition mostly done by Nanase Yokawa herself. So this wasn't just an adaptation. Yeah, she was hands-on. I think she scripted like at least one of the movies too, if not both of them.
Mm-hmm. And like all of the last season, right? Basically, yeah. All of that important stuff. She was very hands-on with it. I started to notice as I was looking for like which episodes I should watch as part of my watching for this. Basically, anytime an episode was important, her name was attached to it.
Yeah, very much so. And this was in addition to writing however many Clamp manga were running at that time. They always have at least 2 or 3 going at any given time, it seems. So the music of the series was by Takayuki Negishi. Again, he also returned for Clear Card, as did most of the crew who worked on Cardcaptor Sakura. I think he does a really great job with the music. It is, I gotta say, actually, he returned for the music. They use most of the same music in Clear Card, actually. If nothing else, it's a testament to how like strong and distinctive a lot of the themes he used, and they don't really get boring over the course of 70 episodes. Also, he's the guy who composed the first opening theme for One Piece. If that tells you anything else about... Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely the Seiyu always stood out to me when because I was always a Seiyu person back in the day. Like, in terms of big names, you've got, Sakura Tange as Sakura herself, but even more than that, you have big name Aya Hisakawa as Karo.
Yep.
Giant name like Sailor Mercury, Miki and Utena, lots of stuff also, around that time.
Gotta say on that note, Karo, he is like top tier magical girl mascot character.
Yes,
I think
possibly the Uber mascot.
He is my favorite out of every magical girl mascot I have ever seen. He's just like he's not too cute. He's really funny. Yeah, he's so great. And I gotta say, I'm a fan. Not everyone agrees with this. Matt Hill as Kero in the dub. I think he's a really good take on the character.
Kero was, when I was younger, I didn't like him. Actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I thought he was kind of annoying. But when I, watching as a kid and then watching it again as an adult, you have very different, ideas about how things should be. I appreciate it a lot more now. Yeah. I'm not sure why I didn't like him as a kid, to be quite honest.
He's more relatable when you're an adult, if anything.
Maybe, I guess, right? He's lived his life. He's just there to kind of look after Sakura now, so he's just really casual. So I guess you could say, pretty relatable in that.
Seki Tomokazu, I recognized as a lot of big kind of Bishonen characters in a lot of anime around that time. He plays Toya.
He was in so much stuff around that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Junko Iwao as Tomoyo, she did a lot of especially roles that required her to sing a lot, and she definitely plays that here as well.
Yeah, we talked about her a bit in the Sherlock Hound episode, because she first got her first big role was in Montana Jones, which is the furry Indiana Jones show. But they got her to, I think she was just cast in a minor role, and they got her to sing the theme song, and and it just kind of expanded her role in that series. And from then on, a lot of the stuff she gets cast in, she tends to have a prominent singing role. I don't know if Tomoyo, or Madison as she's called in the Nelvana dub, I don't know if there was a lot of her singing in the manga, but they certainly devote quite a few episodes to that in the anime.
They're we have this person playing her, we might as well take advantage of it.
The breadth of 70 episodes, I mean, that's where a lot of your creative decisions are going to lie. So
yeah, I'm kind of curious how that's some of the dub episodes I didn't get to check out, but was curious about how did they handle Madison singing for the dub?
You gotta say, I dropped the ball. I didn't watch any of the Madison singing episodes.
Oh no!
For this. And I also gotta say, Megumi Ogata as Yukito.
Yeah.
Inimitable. I don't think any other person, it's not even just a matter of not being able to translate that kind of voice into other languages. I don't think even in Japanese you're going to find very many people who can capture that kind of androgyny in his voice like she did.
Yeah, she was very, very big on playing those types of again, Bishonen characters, but especially the more androgynous and feminine Bishonen characters.
Yeah, bread-loving soft boy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because she was also what's his face? Kurama in Yu Yu Hakusho. That was the other big one I could think of.
Yeah. She was in Akudama Drive recently. She went way against type in that as the sexy doctor character. I was really surprised to learn that she played that role. So Cardcaptor Sakura, big merchandising extravaganza in Japan. And this, of course, was right on the heels of Pokemon becoming a worldwide phenomenon in a manner that was unprecedented for any, video game franchise. But the anime was a huge driving force behind the merchandising and making Pokemon a phenomenon everywhere. And Kodansha, who is the rights holder of Cardcaptor Sakura and the publisher of the manga and owner of Nakayoshi, they were not oblivious to this at all. And with Cardcaptor Sakura being a merchandising hit in Japan, they wanted to get those deals signed internationally as soon as they possibly could. So it's no surprise that they tried to get this show to attract the attention of larger distributors with strong licensing chops, as opposed to a lot of the smaller companies that specialized in anime at that time. And in line with that, it was announced on August 13th, 1999, just shortly before the third season began airing in Japan, Canadian animation and licensing juggernaut Nelvana had acquired the rights to Cardcaptor Sakura, or as they called it in the original press release, Cardcaptor. Given that, a lot of companies were chasing the success of Pokemon, and obviously a Canadian company like Nelvana would have seen firsthand the level of success that Sailor Moon was able to achieve in this country alone. it's frankly not a big surprise that Nelvana went for this. In fact, at the time, Nelvana co-chief executive Michael Hirsch, in that initial statement, cited the fact that the series had a storyline similar to Sailor Moon that would influence fans to follow it, was one of the major factors in their decision to license this show. And drawing parallels between both Pokemon and Sailor Moon is what he mentioned there.
And he's not wrong.
Yeah. And he also noted they hope to derive 50% of total revenue from the series from marketing efforts. And he said it's premature to try to put a figure on it, but we think we can build a serious business out of it. So as soon as that news dropped, people knew exactly where this company's priorities were. And let me tell you, Usenet was not happy. And there were immediately petitions going up begging Nelvana to at the very least make sure that Cardcaptor Sakura would get a uncut release in North America. And we'll get into like the changes that happened to the broadcast version of Cardcaptors or Cardcaptor / Cardcaptor Sakura in a minute. But it is worth noting that one big thing that separated Nelvana from like 4Kids or Saban, or a lot of the other companies that were notorious for heavily editing shows on TV, with more focus on toy licensing potential rather than getting anything out to fans of those shows. Nelvana did strike a deal with Pioneer, who would later be known as Genion, and then later not exist, as both the home video distributor for their version of Cardcaptors and for the uncut Japanese subtitled version. You can criticize Nelvana all you want for the dub they produced. I think that the fact that they did make sure that the uncut version got a commercial release, they do deserve props for that, because that's a big thing that separated them from a lot of those other companies at that time. And quite notoriously, those subtitled tapes and DVDs outsold the dubbed releases significantly. In fact, the dubbed series was not even fully released on home video, which actually made it kind of rare. And it still makes it rare to this day to at least own makes it impossible to completely own like a legal copy of the Nelvana dub. Of course, that success obviously changed a lot of perceptions about the market for anime in North America, and had a big impact in that way. So I should talk a little about who Nelvana is, because I don't think I've gone into detail about this on this show before. Certainly if you grew up in the 70s or the 80s, you may have had a very different idea of what Nelvana is compared to someone who grew up in the 90s or 2000s. And I think basically if you fall into any of those generations, which I think covers 100% of the people who listen to this show, you all know who Nelvana is. You know the name, at least. But Nelvana was actually founded back in 1979 as a small production company by Patrick Laubert, Clive A. Smith, and Michael Hirsch. Michael Hirsch would, as I mentioned before, would be the co-chief executive for the company for the entirety of when Cardcaptors was being handled. All three of those guys were producers on the show, so they were around at that time. And they got their start making a 30-minute documentary on Canadian comic books for the CBC. And their name Nelvana was actually taken from the old 40s comic, Nelvana of the North. That was a success. It worked out really well. And from there, they began to produce live action and animated interstitial content for CBC, which eventually led them to making a number of animated specials like A Cosmic Christmas and The Devil and Daniel Mouse. So their animation style back then was very gritty, experimental, low budget looking, but kind of, endearing and psychedelic. Definitely felt like that substance influence went into these productions to some degree, whether they were targeted at children or adults, and they did animation for both. I think at that time they were mainly known for producing the segment for the Star Wars Holiday Special that introduced Boba Fett to the world, because I don't know if you guys have watched the Star Wars Holiday Special, but there's an animated segment in it. That was actually the debut of Boba Fett. That was before The Empire Strikes Back came out.
To be fair, that segment is probably one of the better things in that special, but
yeah. I think it's the only, actually, Star Wars Holiday Special is being added to Disney Plus apparently.
Is it?
Yeah. In HD in a couple months, I think. That segment is like the one portion that's been kind of properly in print and even remastered and out, because it is the segment most worth preserving. And importantly, having doing that also established a strong relationship between George Lucas and Nelvana. As they gained notoriety, they also had the opportunity to put out their own feature-length film in that same year in 1983. It was called Rock and Rule, sort of a fantasy rock and roll adult-targeted animated film at that time.
Yeah, it was sort of like a heavy metal thing, wasn't it?
Very much like a heavy metal thing. In fact, they had turned down the opportunity to work on heavy metal, which probably was what led to them making this movie. Notably featured the music of Cheap Trick, Chris Stein, and Debbie Harry of the pop group Blondie, and Lou Reed really phoning it in with a couple of those songs. And Iggy Pop and even Earth, Wind, and Fire all showed up in that movie. So that film was in development for 5 years. It cost $8 million to produce, and it made $30,379 in the box office,
Oof.
which is a absolutely atrocious failure. Unbelievable.
Rip.
Almost destroyed the company. So I think that their relationship with George Lucas may have been one of the only things keeping them alive, because they had the opportunity to do those droids and Ewoks animated shows later in the 80s. But also what really helped them a lot was pivoting to children's television, and specifically children's television that had a lot of opportunities for toy licensing. That's what saved them. The 1985 Care Bears movie and the subsequent Care Bears movie were what restabilized that company fully, because they were able to make a lot of money just from box office alone. And obviously the merchandise just kind of blew everything up for them. And after that happened, that really changed the direction for the company. They had relationships with PBS and Fox Kids in the United States. They produced so many shows that aired on those networks, most of which had merchandising tie-ins. And that's where Hirsch and the others built that business for most of the decade. Also, this is an unsubstantiated rumor, but apparently either in the late 80s or early 90s, Nelvana did produce a pilot dub for Fist of the North Star. I have not seen this with my own eyes. I have not heard a first-hand confirmation of this. This is just something that's been kind of a rumor for a few years. If that's true,
I'm sure we'll hear it from Mike Toole if it turns up.
Yeah, I for the record, I heard it from Dave Merrill. But even he's not 100% sure on that. If that's true, that would have been an interesting kind of overlap between the way Nelvana did things in the early 80s versus the late 80s. But also, if true, it would have shown that anime was on their radar very early, and sheds more light on why they made the jump for Cardcaptor Sakura. And it's probably worth noting that focus on anime, whether it actually started then or started with Cardcaptors or started at a different point, it persists today, because Michael Hirsch is currently CEO of WoW Unlimited, and anime is very much central to a lot of their strategy. They are the production company behind the Netflix Castlevania show. They run the Get the Robot YouTube channel. And as
ran.
Oh, is that over now?
Unfortunately, yeah, they had to shut that down, let those people go.
Right. Well, they were running that. So again, it was part of their online strategy. And as I have mentioned many, many times and focused multiple episodes about on this show, they are the company that is responsible for Sailor Moon on Crave right now. They actually licensed it and put it up there. So Hirsch is obviously no longer with Nelvana, but anime is still the licensing potential of anime is very much alive in his projects. So for Cardcaptors Reaching Television, as we touched on before, it debuted on Kids WB on the WB in the States in June 17th, 2000. So the WB, it no longer exists. It got folded into what's now the CW at some point. But I have to emphasize that the WB, it is a network broadcaster. So people didn't need people in the States did not need a cable or satellite subscription to get the WB or the Kids WB block. If you had an antenna in most areas, you were generally able to pick it up. Or if you weren't, you were able to get it in like a low-level cable package. The WB was available in Canada. I guess if you lived in some places, you may have been able to get it on an antenna as well, but it wasn't as common. Typically, you would have to have had a premium cable subscription to get the WB and Kids WB at that time. So again, like I said before, technically available in Canada, but it wasn't really widely available or on a service that more people would have access to until it debuted on Teletoon in English on August 23rd, 2000. So at this time, if you were watching TV at that time, you probably know that almost all anime that was running at that time was on YTV and not on Teletoon. Cardcaptors was the one exception. And it definitely might seem strange, because Teletoon, they ran those manga entertainment OVAs as we discussed a few episodes ago, or one of the previous retrospectives. They ran adult targeted movies and OVAs for an adult audience, but they never licensed anymore, and they seem to have washed their hands completely of anime after that. So it may be puzzling why Teletoon would have aired Cardcaptors. It makes more sense when you realize that Michael Hirsch was actually in charge of Teletoon at that time, because that channel was actually launched by him and Nelvana in partnership with notable criminal organization Sinar in 1997. So obviously, you have the same group of people who are in charge of this television station and this licensing studio. For the sake of synergy, it makes sense that the station, the show would show up there.
That's not surprising to me, because even at the time, like at that age, I could tell there was at least some crossover there, because I definitely recognized some of the Cardcaptors voice actors from their appearances in other Teletoon productions.
Nelvana they didn't work as much with Ocean Studios. I think they did a lot of Toronto based recording. Actually, they had their fingers in lots of stuff. So, but yeah, you definitely heard those voices.
Yeah, like
those same voices in other productions.
What's with Mimi? That's the main one I remember hearing Cardcaptors voices in.
Yeah, I think there's some crossover cast.
What about
that
Mimi? That's
sure.
what it is.
Yeah. So, Cardcaptors on Teletoon wound up being fairly successful. It actually ran from 2000, and they continued rerunning it into 2004. So we don't really know, what the ratings were or anything. We don't get access to that kind of information in Canada like you do in the States a lot of the time. But even if it's just out of convenience sake, the fact that they kept the show on the air for that long, I think, is an indicator that it was fairly successful. And also makes it especially frustrating that Teletoon still would not license more anime, even though Cardcaptors did very well. So Teletoon ran 69 out of the 70 episodes. There's one they skipped. Anyone guess which episode it was?
I know, so I'll see if Ren can guess.
Can I have a hint?
It's not controversial. It's a weirdly mundane episode.
Yeah. It's the episode where Sakura meets her great-grandfather.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
I think it's, why I think it is, and you'll probably confirm this, Jesse. I bet it's because it's an episode where no card is captured, and the only magic that happens is Sakura makes a rainbow.
Yes, that is almost certainly the reason that it was probably skipped. I don't know if that was an editorial decision on Teletoon's part. I kind of doubt that it was. I think Nelvana probably just didn't give it to them. They did dub that episode, though, and it aired in Australia. What's interesting about that episode, though, is that they completely invert the plot of it. Because I think the other thing about that episode is that you have Sakura essentially wandering around and hanging out with who we presume to be a stranger for most of the episode, and no one seems to have a problem with it. They actually invert the plot of the episode entirely and have Sakura know that it's her grandfather. So it becomes actually even more mundane, because she's just going to meet this old man who she knows is her grandfather, and she's like, oh, he misses rainbows, so I'll make him a rainbow.
At that point.
Yeah. And they cut out Tomoyo Madison's mother and everything. Anything that would make that episode distinct is kind of erased. The nuance is gone, so it makes it especially not worth airing. It's neat as a curiosity with that.
Yeah, I watched it just because I was curious about it, and seeing that change is wild. Just because then it's like, well, it's okay. So how come Sakura's dad and her brother don't get to go see her grandpa?
Yeah, it creates more questions. But yeah, so while the show seemed to be fairly successful on Teletoon, things played out a lot differently on Kids WB. So Kids WB was definitely more than just a broadcaster. They were very much, to a large degree, a partner in the production of Cardcaptors. And it makes sense that Nelvana would allow them to have that much power, because, again, they are allowing them to access a potentially huge audience. The WB reaches millions of people. The potential audience for a Kids WB show is millions. You're not actually going to see that show up in the ratings, but it's going to reach so many eyeballs, so much potential for that merch that they want to sell. and there was a lot of merch. So the WB had a lot of editorial control over what was going on. And to this day, there's a lot of controversy over what changes were like the decision of Nelvana and which changes were the decision of Kids WB. And it's kind of hard to say. So when you're looking at just the Nelvana version, like at minimum, these episodes run about 26 minutes. So you can't even fit that into a Kids WB slot. So you're looking at a minimum of 5 minutes being cut from every episode. And the other thing is that the episodes that ran on Kids WB weren't reordered, but they were reordered and they skipped nearly half of it. They reduced the show's run from 70 episodes to 39. Again, compared to Teletoon, which ran 69 out of 70 episodes, Australia, which ran all 70. And they even in-house spliced together episodes and edited them even further from what Nelvana did. Notably, episodes 65 and 66, which is the episode when UA transfers his power to Toya, they were spliced together because Nelvana or Kids W was not happy with the way it was delivered from Nelvana. But anyway, when you're looking at that basic W, you're having a minimum of 5 minutes cut from every episode, usually a little more for the Kids WB broadcast. The music has changed completely, and those music changes really make a big difference.
Yeah, I was surprised. Like, actually, I want to let Ren talk a little bit. Like, you watched like an episode like just today. Like, did the music stand out to you particularly? And if so, how?
It didn't fit the tone of what was really going down, I think, to me.
Sometimes it goes against what you're seeing and actively undermines what's going on.
I felt like it was a really serious thing going on, right? So you'd figure like maybe the mood should shift from like, almost like it felt like a hangout theme kind of thing that was going on, rather than like this is a very pivotal moment for these two right now. Like there's this whole reveal. It reveals Toya knows everything that's been going on and all this, but it just didn't fit, right? It was kind of jarring to watch.
And that's very common, I feel like, throughout the run.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to clarify, if anyone is not clear, the reason that music gets changed in shows like this is not only because the shows are so heavily edited that the music would be choppy if they kept it intact. It's also so they can make royalties off of the recomposed music when it plays in different regions and gets replayed on television, which is the Hayam Saban tactic. He basically
also because music rights in Japan are a nightmare.
So yeah, and Aaron, I think you also mentioned that the changes in music often make the show look worse. That's a very interesting way of putting it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a combination of the kind of like fuzzy TV VHS-ish quality of the what I was watching, but like just the tone of like their like mystical action music tracks that they'll often play for the show make the show like feel like it looks cheaper even.
Yeah, it definitely feels like they're undermining so much of what goes on in the show.
Actually, you mentioned the Caro and Lee body swap episode before. Mm-hmm. That is one of the ones I did watch both versions for to compare. And that's one of the worst ones for music changes.
Oh.
Because it's largely a comedy episode, like it's a Freaky Friday episode. What do you expect? But they keep playing the like suspenseful, epic music throughout to make it like, this is a dangerous situation. How are they going to get out of this? It's totally inappropriate.
I did watch the episode with the dash card where Sakura's classmate kind of befriends the animal that's formed by that particular card and harnesses its power to win races.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the more intact episodes. They keep the basic idea of the plot and the conflict and, the what are supposed to, at least on paper, are the emotional beats intact. The music changes completely ruin it because they don't go for any kind of emotional music. It's all just that low quality, ethereal kind of thumping sound that you
borderline
you get
80s fantasy music.
Yeah. Exactly. You don't get, there's no variety. Like, even in other shows that were being licensed, like even in like the old Sailor Moon and DBZ dubs, they had even a little more variety than what was produced in-house for Cardcaptors.
Yeah.
I always think that changing the music is one of the worst changes you can make for any kind of localization, but it is especially bad in this show. I think it's a bad,
Rin, you mentioned like the hangout track. I know exactly what track you mean because that track is played all the time.
God. Yeah, no, music is very important when it comes to like presentation of an anime. So that just really kind of, I don't want to say ruined because it had its charm, but at the same time, it's like, hey, come on.
Yeah.
This could have been more deep, I guess.
Yeah. And I think as I kind of touched on earlier, the most dramatic thing that they did was changing character relationships. And it's worth noting this wasn't done out of censorship so much. Well, in some cases it was. But it was more to refocus the show. I think it's fair to say that when Nelvana licensed the show, especially when they're citing similarities to Sailor Moon, if they knew that they were going to have to cut out things like Sakura's crush on Yukito or her relationship with Lee, I think that maybe they wouldn't have licensed the show if they knew that they would have to make such drastic changes, because I cannot overstate how much they had to cut in order to achieve that, or to take the focus completely off of Sakura's crush on Yukito / Julian, which is very much a central focus for the first half of the series. Episode 3, perfect example. The whole first half of that episode is setting up how, Sakura wants to go on a date with Yukito, and then various things happen and they wind up going to the aquarium together. So what they do is most of that is just cut out of the first half of the first episode. But because this alone already takes them over the 5 minutes that they'd cut from any episode by default. So they cut even more to the point that there is a 5+ minute recap of episodes 1 and 2, which is thrown in the beginning of the episode to fill up time, because they have cut so much trying to undermine this critical and honestly not really problematic focus on, a little girl who has a crush on someone who's a few years older than her. And like I said, this wasn't out of censorship, because they do allude to it at times. There's a reference to it in the first episode. There's a handful of times later in the series where they make jokes about it or explicitly say that Sakura has a crush on Julian. But
yeah, they very much want to make it a side thing.
Yeah, it is so toned down. It is so they just, the extent that they go to remove it as a central focus, I think is I find it amazing. And it really shows that whoever was making the decision there was putting the localizers under a lot of pressure to make sure that it's erased. And it also makes his entire role in that first half of the series, it doesn't really make any sense why he's even around a lot of the time. And I got to emphasize, I'm just talking about what was cut, the regular Nelvana version. This doesn't even get into the additional edits that were made by Kids WB. The most extensive thing that they did, apart from, skipping so many episodes and reordering them, and a lot of those episodes had important plot details as well, which is kind of funny because they're, they just want to focus on the quote unquote plot, and they're leaving out all these important plot elements.
No, what they want to focus on is the card battles,
which actually a very small part of the show.
They're very besides the point a lot of the time.
A lot of the time. They're an afterthought even. I think the thing that really riled people up was when they actually spliced those two episodes together, 65 and 66. I don't know about you guys. Now, despite the fact that Nelvana and the localizers at Ocean Studios and everyone else involved went to such a great extent to sort of undermine and remove relationships, I thought those episodes were pretty gay. I was kind of amazed at how little they did to undermine kind of what was going on between Tori and Julian / Toyo and Yukito. They say best friends instead of, my number one person.
They did a little bit. Yeah. Like they said best friends. They place a lot more emphasis on the business of the power transfer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But they left in the shot where like Yue lovingly puts his cheek up against Tori's.
They left in that scene when Tori Kabedon's Julian in an earlier episode as well. I was really surprised by that one. I don't know if it's because they didn't realize what that meant, or they just wanted it to slip through. That was very weird, because the show is so notorious for erasing, any kind of relationship. That I would make the argument that was actually quite intact. And I think in episode 65 in general, that's actually one of the, despite everything we've said about the undermining and the inappropriate music changes and all that stuff, I think somehow the intent really still kind of came through in the end in that, which probably explains
although there was one major bit of relationship cutting that didn't directly involve Toya in the scene. Again, Ren, this is the episode you watched today. remember the context of what's going on in the original Cardcaptor Sakura for that episode?
Which episode was this one I watched again? 66 or 65?
66, the one with the star thing, the star maze.
Yeah.
Yes, I think I remember what was going on there, but that was not even. I don't even think it got mentioned at all, or even looked like it even happened.
Not at all. Yeah.
Not even once. Yeah. Because I remember that episode in the Japanese dub. I was like, wait, what's going on here? Why doesn't show on doing anything?
Sorry. And what we mean by what was originally going on was the fact that a big part of that episode of 66 was that Sakura was working up the courage to tell Yukito how she felt finally.
Right.
It's such a visually distinct scene as well. Like the lighting and atmosphere in it are so well considered, but they changed the dialogue completely to be about Julian now knowing what he is and Yue's nature and their connection with Chloe Reed. And sorry, I guess this is kind of spoilerish if you haven't seen the show, and we're not even going to that much detail for those who have.
It's been 20 years, I think.
It's been
spoilers for 20-year-old anime.
Yeah. I think knowing what happens going in isn't going to hurt your enjoyment of the show, frankly.
Yeah, no. I've known the spoilers for years, and I've still enjoyed it. Catching up on episodes that I never got to see.
Yeah. And I will say, like, when I was watching Cardcaptor Sakura, I was kind of relieved that Yukito / Julian would eventually understand what he was, because I was worried that he'd continue on being completely oblivious, that he was just a disguise for Yue, which would have been really frustrating. The Cardcaptor stuff opts to focus on that entirely and take away Sakura's confession scene, which is, a really great scene in the original too. So it shows that even in these episodes, you're going to have really dramatic ups and downs.
Notably, that confession scene also includes the confirmation that, like, Yukito / Julian likes someone else, and that someone else is confirmed to be Toya / Tori.
Yeah, exactly. So you're definitely missing that major part of it as well. A lot to say about those two episodes, both the original and the adaptation choices that are made. But yeah, Kids WB spliced those two episodes together, and from what I understand, their version of it is just lost media now. No one has actually uploaded that onto the internet. So I've only heard vague ramblings about how they handled it. But when you watch those episodes, you can definitely see why Kids WB, if they were the ones who were mandating the extreme downplaying of any kind of relationships, why they wouldn't be happy with the end result, because it's still not enough. Still doesn't focus enough on the cards. So you're looking at all these additional edits that were made by Kids WB and all of these other decisions that are made even in the, like, quote unquote complete Nelvana version. The whole thing did air in Australia, and there's been this kind of persistent myth on the internet that Australia got the real Nelvana dub, like the one that keeps everything intact and is more authentic to the original. And that's a complete lie. No such thing exists. People have thought that all the way back to the Usenet days. It seems to be a perception to this day. There seems to be a small group of people who are determined to restore the Australian cut of Cardcaptors and show people the true glory of what Nelvana was trying to do. And it doesn't exist. I think people have this misconception because they aired all 70 episodes in order. And also because there was one episode they aired that had alternate takes. I think it was episode 7 specifically. There's a video on YouTube that compares the differences between the US and the Japanese version. They're interesting differences. The Australian version, it sounds a little more like anime dialogue, translated anime dialogue, a little less localized, a little less emphasis on, like, the gender of the young thief character. And stuff like that. So as far as anyone knows, that's the only episode that had any differences. I haven't been able to find any evidence that it was different elsewhere. And if anything, it just communicates to me that they did a shit ton of retakes for this show. Probably because, this is speculation, but I would imagine that Kids WB probably wasn't happy with what they were getting a lot of the time and probably made them go back and redub things. And I know that Lee's voice actor, he gives a bit of an inconsistent performance sometimes. He's a bit all over the place. And that also suggests that, a lot of retakes were going on with this show, especially in the earlier episodes. The Australian version also has a English version of the Japanese opening as well. That's definitely one of the strangest things. That's still kind of a mystery. We don't know where that dubbed opening came from. I have two theories. Either that was made in-house by Nelvana at a very, very, very early stage of localization, or it was actually produced in-house by the Australian company that was handling Cardcaptors in Australia, which was Madman Entertainment, who is basically even at that time, they were the monopolizing anime company of Australia. They are now the Sony-owned monopolizing company of all anime in Australia. But Nelvana basically just kind of let them handle that title in Australia. And I think that the reason they maybe used some alternate takes, reordered the episodes, made sure they had every episode and put that opening in. I think they were, because they're an anime company, they were just trying to make sure that the TV version was as intact as they could possibly get it. But ultimately, the materials, they were limited by the materials they could get and could only do so well. So essentially what they got in Australia was the same thing we got, just with a different opening and a couple things changed around. There's no fabled Australian version. It's 100% myth. Don't believe it. In regards to, again, who was making these decisions, I tried to dig up as much information as I could. And there was one Usenet user who actually did manage to get an interview with someone from Nelvana. This was from a website that's no longer there called Fantasticon.com. And the only reason I give this any credence is because Chris McDonald from Anime News Network is one of the people who submitted a question for this kind of interview. But I'll just read a couple of the answers that this Nelvana rep apparently gave, although it was probably an email back and forth, if anything. The person doing the interview asked, why did you skip the first episode and jump to episode 8 of the series? Nelvana, the WB requested that we start from the first episode where Lee Shouran is introduced. So immediately pointing fingers at the WB for that decision. Another question, if your goal is to attract primarily boys, why did you select Cardcaptor Sakura, a show dominated by the female protagonist and obvious girlish themes throughout? Nelvana, we purchased the rights to distribute Cardcaptor Sakura long before the Kids WB purchased the broadcasting rights. Their market is primarily boys, and we believe we're keeping the series enjoyable for both boys and girls equally. Another question by Kyle Pope of the edit list on Anime News Network. Why are the relationships being toned down or eliminated, i.e. same-sex relationships and even heterosexual relationships as well? Nelvana rep said, this series is about capturing the various magical cards running about, not about sexual relationships. The various relationships you speak of are not conducive to children's programming. So some interesting answers there. A lot of pointing to the WB for some of the changes, and also immediately associating any kind of relationship with sex, and keeping that obviously very different and divergent from capturing cards, which is the real focus of Cardcaptors apparently. But yeah, nonetheless, it does seem that Kids WB was definitely more than just the U.S. broadcaster. Another thing worth pointing out is that the theme song, which I have found that a lot of people actually like the North American Cardcaptors theme song. Because of that, I will not comment on my opinions of that theme song. It was composed by David Dore. He currently runs Dore Me Productions in California. As far as I can tell, he worked for the sound department at the WB at this time. And also in a 2003 interview that Charles Solomon did for the LA Times, John Hardman, who was the senior VP for Kids WB programming, he had this to say: "This Sakura is feistier. She's an empowered female, not only to attract girls, but to make sure boys realize she's someone they would aspire to befriend. We looked for an actress with an older voice to make sure we appeal to the upper end of our demographics. We never use the Japanese voices as benchmarks because we know the audiences are so different." So a lot to chew on in that statement, especially their whole perception of targeting things at boys versus targeting things at girls. The perception of what a character like Sakura, or how audiences will respond to a character like Sakura, who in the original Japanese, she's proactive, but at the same time very vulnerable.
She's a 4th grader.
Exactly, yeah. And it's kind of interesting that they would choose to try to make her less so.
Well, that was the main thing that I noticed about the voice performances, was that, that everybody sounded quite mature, despite the fact that they're in these tiny, 4th grader bodies.
Yeah. This quote also highlights that Kids WB played a role in the casting. On one hand, you have all this extra editing that the Kids WB did that kind of stigmatized the dub for people in many ways. But on the other hand, they were extremely hands-on with every stage of this. I even found a promotional video that was released to like stores and toy distributors and stuff in 1999 to promote the show to them. And this would have been about the time that Nelvana confirmed they had the license. And it's supposedly the first episode. It is episode 8, which was apparently Kids WB's decision. So, this goes back really far. And if Nelvana did indeed license the show long before Kids WB was involved, they were hands-on in this really quick. They must have been looking into this show like shortly after it started airing in Japan, if not possibly even before that. So this all goes back a lot longer than I think people realize. Unless you know a lot about licensing, then you know that all this stuff is a giant mess anyway. But anyway, we were kind of getting into the voice cast for the English version, so maybe let's talk about that. Sakura, played by Carly McKillop. She was actually, for all we said about characters sounding more mature or assertive, she was 11 at the time that she did this role.
Really?
She's mostly, yeah, she was. She was, a few years later, she was in this Canadian sitcom Alice, I think. And she has since formed a country music duo with her sister, Britt McKillop. And it's called One More Girl. And apparently they're still active. I don't think they put out very many albums.
That surprises me. She really does sound mature for her age at that time then.
Yeah.
Was it the same one for both the North American and the Australian tape?
They're the same cast, yeah.
They're the same cast, right?
Yeah.
So they retook different lines and used them for different regions, didn't they? Right?
So,
or at least that one episode, yeah.
I think what happened was they re-recorded stuff multiple times, and for whatever reason, the Australian version just wound up having those alternate takes, and Mad Men opted to use them. I don't know exactly what happened. It's a mystery. This is what's fueling all this, like, mythological status of alternate versions.
Yeah, I would guess
they
prepared one version of that episode and then like they had it in the can and then somebody requested changes last minute for the WB version maybe.
Interesting. Okay. Well, the localized version of Sakura definitely is a lot more different from her Japanese counterpart. But I feel like it was a good, like to me at least, it was a good character for like young kids to relate to, I guess. For me, I guess like Sakura in the Japanese dub, she's really gentle, she's really nice. I don't think you would really see that over on this side of the continent,
Like for like uncut modern anime dubs, it's obviously different. But for something for a character you'd have on TV, definitely not something you'd hear so much.
No.
But she's very distinct and I guess a more relatable voice for kids.
Yeah. I certainly remembered her very strongly. That's why I recognized her like almost immediately in those other shows. She has a very distinctive voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, I mean, you compare, like, I think, who does her voice in Clear Card? It was the same as in Tsubasa.
Is it Monica Rial?
Yeah, it's Monica Rial in Tsubasa and Clear Card. Kari Wahlgren in the Jenny On's dub of the second movie. In Clear Card, which is obviously just not aired on TV in North America and just released for an anime audience. She has I think Monica Rial does a good job, but it's an anime voice, anime dub voice, much more typical. And I watched some of Clear Card, and the voices are good, but I find they're not as natural or distinct as what you hear in the Ocean dub. I think the casting, for all you can say about Cardcaptors as a localization project, I think the performances are good for the most part. A little dodgy when you have child actors like Carly McKillop, and Reese Huber plays Lee Xiaoran.
Yeah, I think Lee Xiaoran is probably the weakest of the main cast.
Yeah. When you look past the child voice actors who are, some issues sometimes, but for the most part good and relatable, I think the cast is pretty solid. You have Nicole Oliver as Mei Lin, and example
she's
of
great, yeah,
adult doing a child's voice, but it's it works really well. As we mentioned before, Matt Hill as Kiro, I think is a great take on the character. Watching Clear Card, I found it really quickly. I found that I was missing Matt Hill as Kiro. He was a lot of fun in that role.
Yeah, going from like Osakan accent to surfer dude is not a bad logical leap when trying to figure out a distinctive voice.
Not at all. Then we have Maggie Blue O'Hara as Madison / Tomoyo. I really liked Maggie Blue O'Hara. She was also the voice of Bulma, the first voice of Bulma in Dragon Ball. And I think she was really great as that character too. I really like her take on Tomoyo and Madison. I think, really distinct kind of voice. Definitely one that I'm missing watching Clear Card. In case you don't know, Clear Card is the more recent series. It was dubbed by Funimation, primarily by a Dallas cast. So, more like the people you typically hear in anime now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure who her voice actress is in Funimation's English dub of that, but she's very breathy. She's definitely laboring to kind of imitate the Japanese voice, which, as Rin touched on, that doesn't always work in English, even if you're doing more of a straight dub and not something for TV. Let's see. Willow Johnson as Ruby Moon. Bill Switzer, also a young teenage actor, or a young teenage actor at the time, was Eli, or which is the dub name for Alias. I thought he was an adult actor because he's has a fairly deep voice, and also curiously no British accent, which is something they do in Clear Card, even though he's supposed to be a British character. Maybe they were just trying to avoid the pitfalls of that. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Even Sam Vincent as Julian, I think he's fine. It's appropriate for the character.
Yeah. No, I like the work on Julian / Yue because he's got the range to do both the sweet side of the character and also the more like stoic Yue.
There's one voice that I did think is hilariously inappropriate, but I still kind of like it, and that's Colin Murdoch as Spinner.
Oh no, he's great.
He's so good. Yeah, I love it.
I listened to him after you said that, and it's like, no, he's great. What are you talking about?
I'm not saying it's bad that it's hilariously inappropriate. I think it's good that it's hilariously inappropriate. But when you compare it to the Japanese, it's like, it's so different. But it's a really funny take on the character.
I had to go listen to some clips from like the episode where Spinner gets drunk on candy because I knew that would be the test for that voice.
Yeah.
No, he does a great job.
Nelvana never licensed the second movie of Cardcaptor Sakura. But Geneon did release it, and when they released it, they made their own authentic, uncut dub. I think it's really unfortunate that they went with an LA cast for that, instead of sending it back to Ocean Group, who they worked with a lot of the time, and just giving them a chance to do, with that same voice cast, do an authentic dub. Because I think I really would have loved to see that. They probably didn't do it because in the United States, this dub had become so stigmatized that that their audience wasn't going to want to hear those voices again. But I think it would have been a great opportunity for all those voice actors. And they also robbed us of the chance to see the true highlight of this franchise, which is the Leave It to Kiro-chan short at the end of the second movie, to hear Matt Hill and Colin Murdoch playing the characters in that whole bit. I think that would have been absolutely incredible, but it will never happen, which is a little sad.
So I have a little bit of a voice actor connection to like drop real quick here.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Speaking of like connections to other shows, Matt Hill, Sam Vincent, and I believe Tony Sampson, voices of Kiro, Julian, and Tori, are also the voices of Ed, and Eddie, all three of them.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Oh, that must have been a fun little project.
Yeah.
Jesus.
And really different voices too, but yeah.
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 Speaking of movies, Nelvana did license the first Cardcaptor Sakura movie. This is a little interesting because it's the one piece of the Nelvana dub that I don't think Kids WB had any involvement in. It aired on Teletoon. It did not air on Kids WB. And what's interesting is that the movie is actually visually uncut. There are no visual edits or changes to it whatsoever in Nelvana's version. The music is changed. There are storyline changes, but for the most part, it's more or less intact. And also notably, obviously because they're not cutting any footage, Sakura's crush on Julian is in full display in that version. And because the Nelvana dub doesn't remove any footage, and obviously Kodansha still owns that dub, when Discotek licensed it, they put that dub on the DVD. The DVD is actually fully bilingual because it's intact, so they may as well use it rather than trying to produce one themselves, which would be too expensive. And because the DVD had that dub is also available streaming. It is the one piece of the Nelvana dub that is actually still legally available to this day. You can watch the dub of the first movie on Crunchyroll and Retro Crush, and it's free on Retro Crush as well. If you have like Plex TV, which is free, anyone can download it, there's a Retro Crush channel, and they frequently run the first Cardcaptor Sakura movie with that English dub, which I think it's pretty great.
Yeah, I watched the dub on Crunchyroll just out of curiosity.
Yeah. So I mean, what did you think of that version compared to like the TV version?
Well, it definitely is like a window into like the most like complete that the Nelvana version ever could have been, for sure. Yeah. Considering whatever like goals they had for it and restrictions they were operating under. It's still not great in some respects, just in terms of like some stiltedness of the acting and like changes to the storyline, like you mentioned. I think the most weird change that they went with, I guess, is the changes to the motivations of the antagonists.
Yeah.
Which I purposefully didn't look up what the original motivations were when I watched the dub version. And even watching it, not knowing what her original storyline was, I could tell something was up because something felt off about her backstory when they brought it up. They described it as being like, oh, Chloe Reed taught this lady magic or whatever, but she decided to use it for evil. But nothing on screen suggests that was the case.
Yeah. It's you're still getting a little bit of the removal of nuance. A little bit that I think was going to be inevitable with Nelvana's version, but ultimately a little more authentic.
Yeah, it was really nice to see, like, especially like Carly McKillip's Sakura, like going through, like, there's a bunch of dream sequences in that movie, and just generally I watched a few episodes of the like TV run that were very dreamy for Sakura as well, like the one, where the dream card appears.
Yes.
And she does do a very good, like, mystified, like, dreaming Sakura, like, who are you? Where am I? That sort of, like, lost kind of voice.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. Rin, have you seen the first movie? Did you have any thoughts on it offhand?
Maybe. I don't remember the dub, because I saw the movie subbed, like both of them.
Okay.
I don't remember the dub at all, though.
Yeah. So I don't think everyone caught that one. It aired a couple years later when it was on Teletoon. But yeah, just to kind of summarize the English version of Cardcaptors on Teletoon. So they actually began running it in the fall of 2000. They actually started running it in the same order as Kids WB. So as I mentioned, Kids WB started with episode 8, which to be fair kind of plays out like a reintroduction to the series. But obviously the reason for doing this was to reduce the focus specifically on Sakura and have a little more of it shifted over to Lee Xiaoran. It's not because they were trying to make him the main character, like people say a lot of the time.
Yeah, I've heard that claim before. It's not true.
It's not true at all. Sakura, she is very much the main character in this series, but it's definitely just out of a misguided sense to make the show more relatable for both girls and boys. However, I haven't been able to pin down the actual date that this happened, but it was definitely sometime early to mid 2001. Teletoon started running Cardcaptors in the correct order that matched the Japanese version. And this was probably due to a lot of the fan feedback they were getting, because again, unlike with Kids WB, who chopped the show down, ran it in inconsistent hours, and took it off the air fairly quickly. I think they were done with it before the end of 2001. Teletoon was actually running it at multiple times during the day. They advertised it well. It got eyeballs, it got attention. People were getting into it. So they actually, and keep in mind, we're talking about the broadcaster here that as long as they ran the show over the course of 15 years, they never once managed to run the Venture Brothers in the correct order, which is infuriating. But they did reorder Cardcaptors correctly and ran it for the remainder of the run. And that initial run went into, I think, 2002. So I think a reason for that was probably due to fan feedback, and it only helped the show's reputation more. And I think a lot of these episodes are mishandled, but I think giving people the opportunity to spend more time with the characters and the world across the breadth of 70 episodes, that's going to do a lot to help, people gain an appreciation for the series, even if it's heavily edited. And also getting the plot beats in order makes a big difference, even if a lot of it is changed. And I think, for the most part, even though so much has changed in this, I mentioned that Cardcaptors to Tsubasa pipeline. I think a lot of people legitimately like jumped into a lot of the Clamp stuff immediately after Cardcaptors, and it gives you kind of what you need to know in order to do that, like with as far as things with background and Chloe Reed and the basic themes that you see in a lot of Clamp stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the bare minimum, but it's kind of enough. But anyway, yeah, for the most part, it seems that this show did well for Teletoon. It's not clear how well it really did on the Kids WB. The fact that they didn't want to show every episode of this thing they probably paid a lot of money for probably tells you a lot. But in any press release you find, Nelvana will cite what a huge success Cardcaptors has been. But in any case, the venture with Kodansha and Nelvana was considered successful enough that they continued their relationship, and this is what led them to later license Metabots, which was also a title they licensed through Kodansha, and I think it also influenced their later licensing of Beyblade as well, because the Beyblade manga was licensed by Kodansha, so I think they were definitely a partner in that production committee and played a role in that. And I've already done a retrospective on Beyblade a few years ago, which you can go back and listen to that for a little more on where the relationship went with that. And obviously they made lots and lots of money off of Beyblade. But there's one other thing I want to mention about the Teletoon broadcast is that let's not forget Teletoon is in both English and French. There's an English Teletoon and there is a French Teletoon. And around, in its early days of 1999 and 2000, Teletoon was all about trying to keep those two stations as in sync as possible. So Nelvana only had the rights to Cardcaptor Sakura in English, but they wanted an equivalent to that for the French channel as well. But there already was a dub of Cardcaptor Sakura that was running in France, and it was already dubbed in French. So what they did, this resulted in Teletoon making the very rare move of licensing that significantly more faithful France-produced dub, which is called Sakura Chashu Dakar. And that version, they changed the names in it, which they were still doing in French dubs at that point. The name changes are a little more appropriate in that version. Like, you look at like Sailor Moon and Pretty Cure, where they localized the names. Those decisions make sense. Like, Honoka becomes Hana. That makes sense. Ami and Rei, they basically the same names, but just like massaged a little. The name changes in Cardcaptors are so out there. Like, how do you get Madison from Tomoyo? It's so strange.
Just that they're 3 syllables, basically, both of them.
Yeah, pretty much. She's Tiffany in the French dub, which is like, okay, that kind of starts with the same letter and sound, so that makes a little more sense as a localization. And the relationships are all intact. Every episode is fully intact, and I don't believe they made any edits for time on it either, because obviously Teletoon can run things. Teletoon doesn't have the same advertising time that something like Kids WB did. Importantly, for French-speaking viewers, this was like a very brief, glorious return to having anime on TV again in French. Because it had been a few years since like Radio Canada and all those stations had stopped running anime. They ran anime all through the late 70s, all through the 80s, through the early 90s, but it all stopped around 95 or 96. So this was kind of exciting for people. Because the only other time that Teletoon did this was with Naruto a few years later. They ran Naruto as well. But that was it. They never pursued it further. And it's interesting, I mentioned how I was reaching out to people on social media who watched Cardcaptors in Canada. Most of the most negative opinions I heard about Cardcaptors were from bilingual people who watched both the English and French Teletoon and could tell even as children that the French adaptation was the superior version. And, the voice acting's not great in it. It is fairly localized still. But I mean, the music's unchanged. It's accurate script. It's a good dub. Interestingly, though, when that dub aired on the M6 broadcaster in France, this didn't go for every broadcast, but the M6 channel, when they ran Chashu Dakar, it had 2 opening themes by Europop sensation Froggy Mix.
Oh God! Is that where
I totally forgot about that thing.
Yeah. So Froggy Mix was mixed up in this Cardcaptor Sakura stuff. I tried to research this as well as I could. I'm still not 100% sure on what the connection between this Europop band and and Cardcaptors is they had 2 themes from their album were used as openings in this one broadcast in France. There was another broadcast in France that didn't use these themes, and I think that's actually what wound up airing in French Canada. The Froggy Mix songs nowhere to be found on the French Teletoon broadcast, contrary to what's been reported in some places. But one of the songs, No Nagging, was used as the ending theme for some of the later English Teletoon episodes. I don't know if you guys explicitly remember that, but they used that song as the ending theme, and they ran one of the music videos on Teletoon quite a few times. And I think it made its way onto Kids WB as well, but it was definitely more prominent in the Canadian stuff. But it's this these days especially, highly questionable appropriation of Japanese cultural imagery. With
very like Gwen Stefani style or Avril Lavigne style.
Yeah. And you think the No Nagging one is bad. You can check out the one for Razzmatazz. It's even worse.
Oh, I didn't watch that one.
Yeah, that is like borderline yellow face. But there was some kind of cross promotion going on there. So I don't know exactly what happened here, but I did notice looking at the credits of the music video that they said footage from Cardcaptor Sakura used with permission from Nelvana. So my theory with that is that Froggy Mix wanted to bring that music and those music videos to North America, but because Nelvana owned the rights, they were forced to collaborate with Nelvana in order to just secure the rights to use that footage in the music videos. And of course, if you're doing that, you may as well go all the way and have a cross promotion going on to whatever extent you can. And, obviously Kodansha was real thirsty at this point. So I'm sure they had a big role in all that as well. But yeah, that was like a weird little thing that was going on. I don't know. Did you guys ever see those music videos playing anywhere outside of Teletoon?
No.
Like I don't think
so.
I don't remember Froggy Mix even being a thing outside of the context of Cardcaptors. But it was definitely being pushed, and it felt like a very strange decision to do so.
Yeah, I was even trying to remember where I had even heard the song, because I know I've heard that No Nagging song, but I don't remember seeing that music video at all. So yeah, I wonder if I just saw commercials that happened to use it.
It was played at the end of each anime, a little bit later when it was released, right?
I probably didn't see a lot of the later episodes, I guess. Yeah,
I think I think in the last third of the show. Or something they were putting, and like that they were putting them in as in the credits, and those songs came out in 2001. So I think this was kind of a deal that was struck later on, in that whole thing. But yeah, the woman who's the vocalist in that band, she goes by the name Bettina Antoni. So she was apparently a host on like a French television program. She didn't do any of like the children's programs or the anime blocks or anything. But she did later do years after Froggy Mix, she did a collaboration with Snoop Dogg. Very satisfying to know that there's an indirect connection between Cardcaptor Sakura and Snoop Dogg. I think that's really great. But yeah, very strange little piece of ephemera that's confused me for a long time.
Yeah. And we're getting a little far out into the weeds at this point, I think. It's still confusing. I don't know all the details. I don't think we ever will. So let's finish off with the merchandise. For all that's said about Cardcaptors being like targeted to boys, the merchandise that was released for it absolutely 100% is what you would call quote unquote toys for girls. There's at least one ad, they're girls playing with dolls. They had the full book with the Clo cards, which actually looks pretty cool. Those look like it looks like a really solid set. Sure, and, I didn't have them, but I did handle them at one point because I remember looking at them.
Yeah, there was a lot of merch out there. I think in the U.S. at least, it wound up in clearance bins pretty quickly. I don't know how well it did in Canada, but obviously huge merchandising push went along with this.
I feel like there was a point when I had the Cloud cards, but its memory is very, very hazy right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do remember seeing ads for it.
Yeah. And that whole controversy with the Taco Bell toys that came out for Cardcaptors as well. I don't think this affected Canada at all because, especially in 2000, Taco Bell just wasn't a thing here. I don't think there even was one near my house, and they certainly weren't doing promos for kids' toys. Rin, wasn't there a Taco Bell out your way around then?
Yes,
Yeah.
there was. It's like a combination KFC Taco Bell.
Yeah. But you never saw any Cardcaptors toys at Taco Bell then?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I can't recall.
Anyway, there was this dumb little controversy with where a reverend complained because one of the toys had some Clo cards, which of course look like tarot cards, which harkens back to that old school, what do you call it?
Satanic Panic kind of thing?
Satanic Panic, thank you. I don't think it actually went anywhere, but it's kind of funny knowing that there was a Taco Bell controversy connected to Cardcaptor Sakura. Did you guys have any other thoughts about the dub and the adaptation?
One of the things I noticed that, like, even though, like, all the names are localized, they very rarely paint over the Japanese text in the background like they did in a lot of other dubs.
Yeah, like, but they won't acknowledge that it's in Japan, though.
Yeah, it's still Readington is the name of the town and schools that they use.
Yeah. Apparently they went with Readington because it sounds like Clow Reed. Which
yeah,
I think
and it's even spelled that way.
Yeah, that's a strange decision.
Yeah, but they definitely, like, it's especially weird because a big plot point of, like, the first season is the dream that Sakura keeps having where she's standing facing what is clearly the Tokyo Tower.
It's the radio tower now.
It's the radio tower, guys.
What's special about it?
Definitely not a recognizable landmark.
I don't think they ever go as far as to say this is in America, but they definitely try, like, despite the fact that no Japanese text is painted over anywhere in this show, which is strange because usually this was the time when you were seeing lots of digital edits being made for that. In fact, I don't think the show had very many digital edits at all. You'd think an animation
I think
company...
I saw one, and it was when, like, Maylin first arrives and her name is written on the board in English text in the dub.
Yeah. You'd think an animation company would have the resources to to do digital edits like that, but no, not really. It's but yeah, they really try to undermine it. Like in the Matsuri episode, they say they're going to a Chinese fair, which I think is very weird. And I guess they do that because they want to acknowledge that it's something that is foreign looking, but they don't want to say it's Japanese, because if they say it's Japanese, it will call attention to the fact that this is very obviously in Japan. Really, really weird localization decisions.
Yeah, I think I heard them use the word bizarre as well, at least at some point, in one of the Ariel episodes.
Yeah. A couple notes about like its perception and legacy. I think unlike with like Sailor Moon, this was 2000, so kids could access the internet when they were watching this. And I think that played a big role, especially in the States, with the perception of this dub, because even younger kids could more readily look up information on Cardcaptors, see a lot of angry adults on the internet, and discover that this is very different from the original thing, or that it was a thing from Japan. And, you know, in a lot of cases, this could pique interest in looking up the original, which I think this is an early example of that being a little more of a common occurrence with heavily localized stuff. And also in Canada, I think one thing that a lot of Canadian viewers maybe don't appreciate all the time, or don't fully understand, is that the reason that like Fox Kids was licensing Escaflowne, or that Kids WB was licensing a show like that, was not only that they were trying to capitalize on Pokemon, they were trying to compete with Toonami. Because Toonami was such a big thing on Cartoon Network in the States at this point. But of course, we didn't have Toonami in Canada, so we didn't kind of have that context. And because we didn't have Toonami, I think a show like Cardcaptors, which, you know, if you've watched Pokemon, Dragon Ball Z, Gundam Wing, and you've got like a bit of a hunger for more, for anime that doesn't lean so much into like the Pokemon kind of formula, or is not heavily obviously commercialized like a lot of other shows, and you don't have the resources to find anime on home video or on the internet, this is probably going to be very appealing to you. And I think that was the case for a lot of people.
I also wanted to talk, we mentioned that the characters sound more mature generally. I do want to point out the fact that they also have slight personality tweaks, because this was on the tail end of the late 90s, early 2000s, and like, I think edgier styles of comedy and writing were in at the time. The characters are a lot snarkier to each other in the dub.
Oh yeah, for sure.
They insult each other a lot more. They make a lot more like pointed jabs at each other, especially between like Sakura and Sakura Sakura
Sakura.
and
Yeah,
Kiro and Lee. It feels weird considering like I know I'm looking at Sakura, who's a very sweet character, and watching her like just be like a sass machine is kind of weird.
Yeah, it really is. And Cardcaptor Sakura is a show known for like its pleasant character interactions too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I will give props to like occasionally, you will get a good snarky line. Like, again, going back to that body swap episode, you can tell this is one of the ones I wrote more notes for. There's a line that one of Kiro's lines to Lee is, you ought to thank me. I gave you a personality.
Damn.
Oh.
Yeah, again, that's a little odd. On a technical level, in terms of like, they were cutting things left, right, and center, and often it really feels that way because like, the edits themselves are really sloppy a lot of the time. Like, just from a technical standpoint, there's a lot of instances where like, a line will just seem to cut off, or like you'll see a few frames of what would have been the next shot before they cut to another one, or like things like that. Yes,
like Saban and 4Kids, they were at least good at mangling anime to the point that they did.
The dub also has a sequence at the end that they'll run sometimes, probably in episodes where they had to cut more content, where they have a card of the day segment, clearly supposed to be similar to the like who's that Pokemon or whatever. But I always thought that was to like catch viewers up on like episodes that were cut. Like,
might have been,
to show where Sakura got some of these cards. But the fact that they actually did dub all the episodes and still did that is interesting to me.
The Teletoon broadcasts keep in the Leave It to Kiro segments, or Kiro's Corner, as they call it there. Apparently those were cut in the Kids WB broadcast. Because they had to keep it,
I guess, if their time slots were even smaller.
Really small. They ran so many ads on Kids WB back then.
Because I do remember Matt Hill's Leave It to Kiro segments.
Yeah.
Or not Leave It to Kiro. Kiro's Corner. Hey there, card fans! Welcome to Kiro's Corner. I remember that very well.
Yeah.
I do remember that now too. It reminds me.
Rin, any last thoughts on the dub before we just give some more general thoughts on the show?
I kind of want to go watch it again, quite honest with you.
Yeah?
Just listening. Yeah. I know I didn't talk a lot through this whole thing, but I don't remember it finishing the dub, just bits and pieces of it here and there, right? But I did get into the anime once I did find it like on the internet when I was younger. But I kind of want to go back in and reappreciate what the dub was.
Yeah,
and
it's a curiosity nuances. For sure.
Yeah.
Oh, there is one other thing we haven't discussed about the dub, is how they handle the final 3 episodes, which is a little interesting. Yes. So as I've touched on before, they greatly minimized the subplot, or the kind of really focus of the final season, which is the relationship between Sakura and Shaoran Lee. And, you know, Shaoran kind of dealing with that for the last 20 or so episodes. There was all this bear symbolism that was going on throughout that season, where he was like making her a bear and wanted to give her the bear. This whole bear thing has carried over into Clear Card. All bears have been removed in the Nelvana version, which is too bad, because it's nice bear symbolism. Yeah. But they go to maybe the most extreme in the final 3 episodes, because the third last episode, it's almost entirely intact. And what they do is, instead of cutting 5 minutes out of that episode like they do for nearly every other episode, they carry that 5 minutes over into the next episode, into the second last episode, and pad it out a little more. And then they take about 10 minutes from the end of that episode, carry it over into the final episode. So you get a little of that last battle with Ariel and Ruby Moon and Spinner carried into the final episode, because originally the final episode, which is more of an epilogue. So they get the battle in there. And then what they do, they add some more flashbacks into that final episode, and it actually ends before the final scene with Sakura and Shaoran Lee in the airport.
I didn't watch the whole final episode dubbed, but I saw like a comparison clip on YouTube showing like the differences in that last episode.
Yeah.
And it just kind of like, expectedly, you see a few shots are cut out, a few lines are cut out or changed or whatever, but then it makes a leap over one scene to get to Sakura in her room when, spoilers, she creates one final card, and in the, I'm guessing in the original, I still haven't watched the original end of the series yet because I want to watch all of Cardcaptor Sakura properly before I do that. But I presume she's thinking more about like her feelings for Shaoran and whatnot at that point. Whereas in the dub, they make it more about the fact that he's going back home and like she's just sad about losing her friend. Yeah. And the final shot of the dub is that new card that she's created and the feeling that like, oh, maybe I'll see him again someday. Maybe there's hope for that.
So that, again, I gotta emphasize, that's not the Kids WB edit. That is the quote-unquote raw Nelvana version that completely lops off that ending. Compared to something like the Saban Escaflowne dub, which at least got a lot better as it went on and was more closer to the original by the time you get to the last few episodes, it felt like Cardcaptors had bottomed out in terms of the way it was handling that kind of thing at the end. That was really disappointing to see. On that note, I think it still would have been cool if Teletoon had like licensed the second movie, because they picked up a bunch of movies from Geneon in about like 2007 or something. Like they got Akira and Armitage and a couple more. Geneon had the rights to the second Cardcaptor Sakura movie. I think it would have been like cool if they had run that on TV and picked up the rights to it, but it would have been completely contrary to what people had seen in the end of the Cardcaptors dub, because it focuses entirely on the stuff that was cut from that English dub or downplayed so much in the final few episodes. But,
yeah, you would have either, like if you were watching the dub and went straight to clear card, you would either not know what was going on at all because you didn't see those episodes at all, or you did see those episodes and they just didn't focus on that stuff at all.
Yeah. All right. And any final thoughts on just Cardcaptor Sakura in general? Just your impressions of the show itself, not focusing on the localized stuff.
Watch it. It's good. That's all I have to say.
Yeah. It's so gorgeous.
Yeah.
Like a lot of this stuff, just for the sake of time, I had to watch it on my phone. I feel bad for doing that because you know, a lot is said today about how a lot of older cell-based animation looks better when you watch it on VHS or with the scan lines or whatever. That is not the case with Cardcaptor Sakura. You got to watch this like on the biggest TV you can with the best video quality you can. Yeah. And like, I think it looks better than ClearCard. Like ClearCard is like a really great digital production, but it does not look as good as the original.
Yeah. The colors are a little muddier. The lines are a little less sharp.
Yeah. Also, I think with Cardcaptor Sakura, as I suggested with Kiro, I think it's like the perfect level of cute. Like it manages to be really, really endearing and sweet without being overly saccharine. And I think that really helps set a good tone that makes it approachable to a lot of audiences.
I will say there's one major thing about the original that I do have to say.
Oh yes,
in terms of a detraction from it. Yeah.
I think I know what it is.
Yeah, you can probably guess if you know anything about Cardcaptor Sakura. The one good thing that did come out of the changes in the Nelvana dub and the reduction of every single romantic relationship or instance of romantic feelings is it did remove some very questionable relationship subplots from the original that, like, watching nowadays as an adult, I look back and I'm like side-eyeing Nanase Okawa a lot because there were a lot of weird relationships like that throughout Clamp.
Oh my god, we've gone more than 2 hours now and we haven't mentioned Rika at all.
Yep, probably for the best. But yeah, for those who don't know, there are a few character relationships in the original Cardcaptor Sakura where there is a significant age gap. One is the relationship between Sakura's mom and dad, who when her mom was still alive, they fell in love as student and teacher, and not even college student and teacher, high school student and teacher. Yeah, they got married when he was a university teacher or a whatever teacher, and she was 16.
The anime version, it downplays this a little bit. The manga version, like, actively calls attention to it, though.
So that's uncomfortable. Tomoyo's mother rightfully yelling at Sakura's father for marrying her that young in that episode when they talked
Oh yeah,
about it.
we haven't really talked about Tomoyo that much in this episode either. One change, and I guess it's kind of seamless, is that obviously in the original Tomoyo is like kind of has a stalker level obsession with Sakura, which I guess she kind of gets from her mother, because her mother was also in love with Sakura's mother, even though they were
also
cousins.
her cousin.
Her cousin, yes.
And that's not the only cousin relationship in the show either.
It's funny, if you go to the Clamp wiki and look up the article about Mei Lin, like right up front, it's like Mei Ling Lee is a character in the anime version of Cardcaptor Sakura. She is the first cousin of Shaoran Lee and his betrothed since childhood.
Not even a second cousin.
Yeah, and I like how they call attention to that immediately. Like just in case you think it might be like a Fruits Basket thing where everyone's, they're all fairly distant cousins in that show. It's like, no, this is the first cousin. And if you go through that article, it's kind of funny because they talk about the Nelvana changes, and they say, in the US version of the series, Mei Ling is renamed Mei Lin Ray so that the relationship between Shaoran as cousins is not existent due to Nelvana deeming it inappropriate. Whoever wrote that is very angry at that change.
And I was actually curious too about, like, did they think that this was okay because they thought it would be like okay because they're Chinese characters? No, cousin marriage is very illegal in China, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know that Okawa has said that part of the theme she wanted to explore in Cardcaptor Sakura is like unconventional relationships, which that's kind of an interesting way of putting it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, just, I understand that Sakura's crush on Yukito. That's, that there is an age gap there, but clearly it is not uncommon for young kids to have crushes on older people, and that episode where she says her feelings to Yukito, I think they play that very well with him letting her down gently and trying to tell her, like, you think of me like you think of a family member you love very much.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that at all. I don't,
yeah.
But yeah.
That's great. But
Yeah. And also, Rika and, the teacher as well.
That's the worst one. That's absolutely the worst one.
Yeah. So in the manga, so what happens is Rika has a crush on her teacher. And what happens in the manga is that they don't get into a relationship, but it's like they have like this promise that they will be together later when she gets older, which is whatever. I don't care about any kind of justification that they give for it. It's really creepy.
Yeah, no. This guy is clearly in his like late 20s, early 30s. She's 10.
Yeah.
There's no justification for that at all.
No. And I don't know if in Japan, sometimes I get the feeling that grooming just isn't stigmatized there the same way that it is here. Yeah, I don't understand how stuff like that is just so well, it's fairly commonplace in a lot of shoujo manga, especially stuff in like Nakayoshi. Like, I don't think that like your average Japanese person thinks that differently of it either, but it's just so weird that it's so prominent in like such mainstream things that are targeted at such young people. It is worth emphasizing that the anime version tones that down significantly, even in the Japanese version. In that version, for the most part, Rika has a crush on her teacher, and they kind of leave it at that. They do uncomfortably toe in. Bad. Yeah, they uncomfortably, tiptoe into it now and again. For the most part, I don't think it's really that bad how it is in the original.
Yeah, I think I caught one instance of the teacher blushing back at one point, and that was about it.
That's about it. I think that, with some massaging, I think that even could have worked in the English localization. Yeah. But what they do is they change it so that Rika is afraid of her teacher.
Yeah, that was, I was going to say, that was the dub change. I was like, oh, that kind of makes it more appropriate.
It's also, it kind of creates weird baggage when you know what's actually going on. Yeah, there's just no way of making that good. That's why they wrote Rika out in Clear Card. It's just like, she went to another school. We're not going to talk about her anymore.
Sent her on a bus, as the TV Tropes crowd likes to say.
You know what? To be quite honest with you, I totally didn't notice any of that. Probably because I was younger then.
Yeah,
that's fair.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, if I went back to it now,
I
would
didn't
totally
either.
called all that out. Yeah, for sure. So I haven't reviewed it recently, but now that you mention it, I'm like, oh yeah, a lot of that stuff actually happened there. It's friggin' messed up.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable to watch as an adult, but then you get back to the like sweetness of the rest of the show, and it kind of like makes up for it.
Yeah,
I guess, right. It's unfortunately pretty common with all kinds of different anime out over there, right?
Yeah, especially shoujo. Before we wrap up, just talk about the legacy of Cardcaptor Sakura. This is a show, it's on Netflix, it's on Crunchyroll. Questionable English dub, but English dub available nonetheless. Do you guys think it's still a good show for kids to watch?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, I'd say so. Might be a bit like confusing for younger people, but maybe like around like middle school, it'd probably be something that's pretty interesting.
Or even like late elementary for sure.
Yeah. You know what? I think it's good. I think it has a lot of good messages about just overcoming challenges, collaboration, working through feelings, or just working with other people. Taking consideration for public safety when doing something dangerous. There's a lot of that in Cardcaptor Sakura. I think it's all good. Sakura is a very good character. I think she's a good role model for young kids in a lot of ways. I think, especially in the original version. I think it's a really good show for kids. I think even with kind of the more questionable stuff intact in the uncut dub, I think it's still okay.
Exercise parental guidance while your child is watching a show.
Yeah, exactly. The manga I'm not so sure about. I think obviously it's good that it's out there for clamp completionists. I don't know if it's as good for young kids to read.
I noticed something about Clamp. Do they have something against like just mother characters in their series? Because they're like always dead, or something is wrong that happened to them, like a tragic thing. I've just realized that right now.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was just a thought I just had.
I don't know if I have a clear answer for that, but if you watch Devilman and then you go into X, any version of X.
Oh yeah,
I think that
was a Clamp series. It was, wasn't it?
Yeah, they wrote like doujins for it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's going to shed a lot of light on how they handle a lot of themes like that. Okay. Yeah, and obviously there was as we've already been talking about frequently through the show, there was a new sequel series, Clear Card, that came out a couple of years ago. I've watched about half of it. I think it's fine. There's a lot of complaints. People say that the stakes are too low because Sakura, she's obviously a much more powerful character, and they try to create new challenges for her, but they are ultimately kind of negligible because kind of like the problem pops up near the end of the episode and she resolves it quite handily. Ultimately, though, I think it's a pleasant show to watch, and captures a lot of what was great about the old series.
Talking about like showing the original to younger kids nowadays, I saw on some of those like social media posts that you were looking at, or that you were making, one of the comments that struck me was from a parent who is showing the new dub to their 6-year-old, and they're quite enjoying it. But when it came time to watch that first movie, and the only dub of it that's available is the Nelvana version, that is what confused the 6-year-old. Like, why are all the names different?
Yeah.
Like, what are they doing? They sound different. What's going on?
There's some things that kids will notice that will bother them more than the quality of a dub.
Inconsistency stands out.
Inconsistency. That's what bothers kids. That's what gets kids picking things apart when they watch cartoons or shows.
Yeah, like I remember one of the things that bugged the hell out of me the most when I was a kid was I had one of my most well-worn tapes was like one of the My Little Pony movies, and one of the things that bothered me the most was that show was very cheaply produced, obviously, and there were a lot of animation errors. Specifically, there were several scenes where like characters who were established to be in another place appeared in like different shots, and that like I was so frustrated as a kid, like, why are these characters here? They were clearly in this other place. What's going on?
Okay, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Watch the anime.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I think we can leave it at that. All right, guys, This was a very long episode, and thank you so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts and your experiences with Cardcaptors and Cardcaptor Sakura. So before we go, I would like to know if you can let people know again where folks can find you online.
Sure. Yeah, you can again find me on YouTube, youtube.com/ErinCerise. That's ErynCerise. You can also find me on Twitter at that same handle, and you can follow my podcast, Super Idols RPG. You can search pretty much any podcasting platform for it, or you can go to our website, superidolsrpg.wordpress.com.
You can find me on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube at Rin, R-I-N, Senpai. I'm sure most people listening to this podcast should know how to spell that, and I would be playing many a gacha game as well as Genshin Impact, and more recently the new Love Live PS4 game.
Oh yeah.
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 It's very difficult.
And please smash that subscribe button for both of these fine folks. Thanks for tuning in to Zonan Canada. You can reach me on Twitter at jbetteridge or email zonancanada@gmail.com. Theme song is by Ultraclystron and can be found on his album Packet Flood. You can find that at ultraclystron.com. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast app of choice. I do have a Coffee account. You can find it at ko-fi.com/zonancanada. If you like what I do, feel free to throw me a few dollars. Thanks a lot for listening. See you again.
Bye.
Bye.